This is a very important story. The important story. Amidst COVID 19, it's a historic opportunity to look at the facts of the world and then to focus on the solutions to some of our greatest problems, and one which is poverty. Good day, we are Group 1 and we are tasked to discuss Sustainable Development Goal 1, which is to end poverty in all its forms.
The human race has never had to face a set of challenges as we do right now, but together, we can overcome them. It's a myth that every one of us can change the world dramatically and quickly. There have been enormous shifts in power and behavior to the benefit of all humanity, and it can happen again.
Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." And these are some of the things that must be done.
The first Sustainable Development Goal is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Eliminating poverty presents an enormous challenge because we find it almost impossible to imagine a world without poverty. I want us to imagine a world without poverty. A long time ago, in 1987, an Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke promised that by 1980, no Australian will be living in poverty. Despite the fact that Hawke's government reduced the number of children living in poverty by 30%, he and the others felt that they had failed. Hawke's failed attempt to eradicate poverty illustrates the very important fact that lifting individuals out of poverty do not end the circumstances that create poverty.
We experience the same defeat when we give money to someone begging on the street knowing we are alleviating an immediate need but not ending poverty. If poverty persists in a wealthy country like Australia, how can we eradicate it on a global scale?
Now, to meet this challenge, we need to break it down. SDG 1 defines extreme poverty as people living on less than $1.90 per day. This amount is relative, but we can see that when we talk about extreme poverty, it is a matter of bare essentials. The good news from a purely financial perspective is that the SDG's target is certainly achievable. Economist Jeffrey Sachs calculates that the cost of alleviating poverty at extremely 175 billion per year over 20 years is equal to less than 1% of the combined income of the richest countries in the world. No, poverty is the very first SDG, and for good reason. We know that poverty makes vulnerable people even more vulnerable. People living in poverty are pushed to the limits of survival and are unable to fulfill their true potential.
When most of us think of poverty, we immediately think of income as in the amount of money that we make per day or per week or year and the quality of life that affords us. That's a measure that's quite simple to think through, and most people think of that when they think of poverty living on less than a certain amount per day, for example. However, experts who work in poverty alleviation stress that it's a very multidimensional problem and there's no one single cause or factor. It encompasses a whole host of factors including poor health, lack of education, inadequate living standards, disempowerment, poor quality of work, the threat of violence, and living in environmentally hazardous areas, among others.
In other words, there is no single cause of poverty. It can be caused by many factors, including unemployment, social exclusion, or lack of safety nets, and vulnerabilities to disasters, diseases, and other phenomena which may prevent productivity. Furthermore, today we're going to go over all the targets that are part of this goal and where we currently stand in achieving it. We're going to discuss each target together with the projections, plans, projects, and those made adjacently. Actually, there are two types of targets within the 2030 agenda. There are substantive targets that lay out what we're trying to achieve, and there are what's called means of implementation. And these means of implementation targets are more focused on the kind of the enabling factors or the pieces that we need in order to achieve the more substantive goals. To this would include things like trade, technology, financing, and so forth.
Let's start by Target 1.1. By 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. What it means is that the international poverty line represents extreme poverty by global standards. It was first introduced in the 1990 World Development Report by the World Bank and was at the time $1 per day. Over time, the $1 poverty line has increased due to inflation and changes to purchasing power parity. The current international poverty line is $1.90 per day, which was updated in 2015. Where we are currently, according to the most recent data, 10% of the world's population of 734 million people lived on less than $1.90 a day. That's approximately 1 in 10 people on the planet. The majority of people living on less than $1.90 a day live in sub-Saharan Africa. 4 out of 5 people below the international poverty line lived in rural areas. Globally, the number of people living in extreme poverty had declined from 36% in 1990 to 10% in 2015. Unfortunately, extreme poverty is expected to rise in 2020 for the first time in over 20 years due to COVID-19. Data is still being calculated on the exact impact. Some believe it could be as much as 500 million people or 8% of the total global population.
Now, the next target of this goal is that by 2030, we are going to be able to reduce at least half of the proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to the national definitions. Now, this only means that the poverty line varies from country to country because money is not worth the same in every country and the cost of living varies a great deal. This target goes beyond the global extreme poverty line to look at poverty according to the national context. Now, where are we currently in this target? Now, because there is so much variance and it is hard to give aggregate numbers here. Now, currently, 2/3 of the world population live on less than $10 per day. Here are some indications of the poverty lines and percentage of the population living in poverty for countries, but keep in mind that there can be a great deal of variance in the measurements based on how the country sets their poverty line, and this can be quite political determination. In other words, some of this data is apples to oranges. This tracker provides more detail on a country-by-country basis, and this one from the OECD is also good for comparing high-income countries. Now, as you can see here, USA stands at 17.8%, meaning to say their poverty line is at $12,880 per year for one person and $26,500 per year for a family of 4. Now, as you can see, Canada here differs from that of USA. Canada stands at 11.9%, meaning to say they have a poverty line of $18,771 per year for one person and $37,542 per year for a family of 4. Now, UK differs from Canada and USA as well. They stand at 12.4%, meaning to say they have a poverty line of £8,112 per year for one person and £19,812 per year for a family of 4. As you can see, Switzerland right here differs as well. They are 9.2%, meaning to say they have a poverty line of 27,348 CHF per year for one person and 47,712 CHF per year for a family of 4.
The next is Target 1.3, which entails to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030, achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. What it means: social protections is the system that provides income security in cases of old age, unemployment, sickness, invalidity, work injury, maternity, or those of the main income earner. However, according to the World Bank and the International Labour Organization or ILO, social protection goes beyond just income support to also include programs that provide access to the healthcare, link individuals to jobs, improve in productivity, invest in children's well-being and education, and protect the aging population. I know it's not the best source, but Wikipedia provides a good breakdown of the most common types of social protection. Labor market interventions are policies and programs designed to promote employment, the efficient operation of labor markets, and the protection of workers. Social insurance mitigates risks associated with unemployment, ill health, disability, work-related injury, and old age, such as health insurance or unemployment insurance. Social assistance is when resources, either cash or in kind, are transferred to vulnerable individuals or households with no other means of adequate support, including single parents, the homeless, or the physically or mentally challenged. In this target, you will see a reference to social protection floors, which refers to a basic minimum number of supports the government should provide and includes: number 1, access to essential healthcare; number 2, basic security of services for children, including nutrition, education, and care; number 3, basic income security for persons at active age who are unable to earn sufficient income, in particular in cases of sickness, unemployment, maternity, and disability; and number 4, basic income security for older persons. Where we are currently, according to the ILO, only 27% of the world's population has adequate social security coverage, and more than half lack any coverage at all. Only 22% of unemployed workers are covered by unemployment benefits.
After the implementation of appropriate social protection systems is Target 1.4. By 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology, and financial services, including microfinance. What it means: this target is made up of two big components: basic services and tenure. Basic services refer to the proportion of the population living in households with access to basic services: water, sanitation, condition of the dwelling, overcrowding, level of education of the head of the household. The tenure component can be tricky to explain. For many people, especially poor women and men, indigenous peoples, and local communities, access to land, property, and other natural resources are often in jeopardy. This issue is often rooted in inequality and unequal rights for certain groups, but also has to do with land acquisitions by foreign and domestic investors for agribusinesses, forestry, extractive, or other large-scale projects, or SDSN. For those who rely on the land and natural resources for their well-being and livelihoods, having legal rights and tenure to these things is fundamentally important to alleviating poverty. Where we are currently, some of the indicators in the SDG framework are not fully developed. This is the case for this target, so it was difficult to find relevant information. The only statistic I could find was that the proportion of the population with unmet basic needs was 8.7% in 2012, not current information. This is another criticism of the agenda, as some pieces currently are not measurable.
Now, the last substantial target is that by 2030, we will be able to build resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations and to reduce their exposure and vulnerability to climate-related extreme events and other economic, social, and environmental shocks and disasters. Now, this only means that this target is specifically pointing to a sad fact that those who are poor are the most vulnerable when there is a disaster or shock. Obviously, the pandemic was a health shock that pushed millions back into extreme poverty. Climate and weather-related disasters wreak havoc on communities with increasing frequency. This target only links poverty and these issues and calls for building resilience in these communities. Now, way back 2018, there were 23,458 deaths and 2,164 persons missing, and these were attributed to disasters in 80 countries. This only led to economic losses of $23.6 billion reported by 63 countries. The least developed countries, or the LDCs, are disproportionately affected in this data. The Sendai Framework monitoring process found that while the LDCs made up of 14% of the population they monitored, that the LDCs reported 29% of the deaths. Similarly, LDCs made up just 2% of the GDP of all the countries reported, but they have suffered 10% of the total direct economic losses. Now that comprised all the 5 substantial targets. The next targets would be the means of implementation. The first target would be that to ensure significant mobilization of resources from a variety of sources. This includes through enhanced development cooperation, to provide adequate and predictable means for developing countries, in particular the least developed countries, and to implement programs and policies to end poverty in all its dimensions. And the last target is to create sound policy frameworks at the national, regional, and international levels based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive development strategies to support accelerated investment in poverty eradication actions.
Again, SDG 1 focused on creating a world with no poverty. It is comprised of 7 targets, 5 of which are substantive and 2 of which are means of implementation. It takes the frame of a multidimensional form of poverty, not simply based on income, but a whole host of factors that lead to a person's quality of life.
Poverty can be measured both in absolute and percentage terms. Absolute being the total number of people living in poverty, and percentage being the share of the population.
Moreover, it has been said that poverty is foundational to the second SDG of no hunger, and these two are often found hand in hand. Poverty is exacerbated by all forms of inequality, including gender inequality, and is intimately related to the lack of access to education. Children are disproportionately impacted by poverty, as are women. People in poverty are greatly affected by natural disasters, economic downturns, illnesses, and violent conflict. At their worst, these disasters have caused death or greatly reduced life expectancy. One of these disasters is the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been more than 27 million confirmed cases and more than 900,000 people have died. Billions of people have been in lockdown for months, which lives and livelihoods have been threatened and lost. But as some lockdowns are easing, people are emerging into a different, uncertain world with a new appetite for change.
Today, we feel the weight of history on our shoulders. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown how fragile the world is. A microscopic virus has put us on our knees, and that fragility should make us humble.
COVID 19 has been likened to an X ray, exposing fractures in the skeleton of the societies we have built, a world with great inequality which must be righted, and a world which must win the battle against climate catastrophe.
Next door's on fire. Oh my god. Okay. I'm scared.
You're at risk. Leaving now is the safest option, so leave now towards the beach and shelter in place.
We're going. Clay's just getting in his car. We're out of here, you guys, because the whole place is on fire. Oh my god, my neighbor's house. Okay. Come on, Clay, we need to go. Oh my god. This is a real nightmare. I can't believe this is real. I can't see anything. This is literally not real. This is not real. Oh my freaking god. All I want is my family.
Pictures and stories continue to file out from Australia about the devastating fires. This one, a satellite image from NASA. And as you can see,
Que alcanzaron hasta 2,5 metros en la capital. Rising death toll and massive evacuation in Indonesia as water swamped Greater Jakarta following the heaviest downpour in more than 2 decades.
Worst plague of locusts to affect the region.
the damage to pastures and crops could create, quote, severe consequences for the region where nearly 12 million people are coping. It could be the worst the area has seen in 20 years.
This is a double whammy. You know, we're dealing with a cyclone and with exposure to COVID.
Well, the fires raging in Northern California have now become some of the largest in state history. More than 12,000 firefighters are currently battling the blazes that have...
San Francisco Bay Area smothered by some of the worst air quality on the planet.
Valley reaches an all-time high of 100.
Delhi on Tuesday recorded the hottest day.
Spiking above 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
These are just some areas our climate and our planet are facing in which we must take urgent action because this may have been one of the causes or factors of poverty. Having this more holistic frame can help us to develop solutions and policies that look at these systemic issues. We are all part of this. This is our planet, therefore we have already signed up for the Sustainable Development Goals into building a set of solutions for the biggest problems the world faces. What are the actions we can take as individuals, as a community, as a nation?
A lot of this would include donations, wasting less food and supporting local farmers, using energy efficient appliances, creating job opportunities, abolishing marginalization or institutional barriers that prevent certain groups of people from having representation in their communities, recycle and avoiding the use of too many plastics, plant trees to stop global warming, and most importantly, educate every single person in your community, children, women, and men of all ages, regardless of race, religion, disability, and other differences. In short, eradicate injustices and promote equality.
We are living in a world where things are not the way we want. We are living in a world which is full of inequalities, which is sexist, which is racist. We have systems that are discriminating against people. Our climate and our environment is at risk. There is so much that needs to be done, and in scenarios like this would only promote poverty in the whole world. We are all part of this. We need to change the system. Change is possible at any time, any age, and with any differences we all have. It's time to make our laws equal.
The whole planet is at stake, so this is a moment to recognize that the way we have been moving leads nowhere and that we need to change course.
I think this is the most important issue that we need to be talking about. We are not doing it! We are not doing it!
Climate change is here now, and it is killing people right now. The people who are looking at it right in the face.
The next 8 to 10 years is going to determine the quality of life for the next 100 to 200 years.
We all watched with amazement when exactly 1 year ago, young people from all over the world took to the streets to express their feeling that we're not doing enough about climate change.
Today we take a stand for Mother Nature.
That we're not treating it like the emergency it is. It's a year later now. Have we done enough? No, we have not. And climate change is only part of this story. Our rainforests are disappearing at an extraordinary rate. 1 football field of rainforest is destroyed every 6 seconds. 1 million plant and animal species are on the brink of extinction. By 2050, there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And so climate change and our treatment of the natural world are colliding and exacerbating each other to create a perfect storm. This cannot go on. You know it, I know it, and we know what we need to do. We need to reduce global emissions by 50% by 2030. To do this, we need a rapid but just transition to renewable energy. That means an end to the building of new coal power stations and an end to subsidizing of fossil fuels. Government should also shift the tax burden from payrolls to carbon. Taxing carbon rather than people will increase output and employment while reducing emissions. And we need to stop deforestation in its tracks, planting trees instead of chopping them down. We need to think about what we eat and how we produce food, embracing healthy, nutritious diets, sustainable farming methods, and reducing food waste. The climate crisis is an opportunity. Renewable energy is cheaper than fossil fuels. Thousands of businesses are working to go carbon neutral, and the opportunity to generate clean, safe, and decent jobs is enormous. The passion for protest can turn into a passion for changing all of our behavior to create a better, safer, just, sustainable world. The big question we have to ask ourselves now is this: as a species, are we going to be able to work together urgently to solve this? The clock is ticking.
I want to tell you a story about 1999. I used to teach people how to write computer programs. And I had a very, plush office and everything. And just outside of these offices, there was this large, sprawling, urban slum full of children. So one day I tried an experiment. I made an opening in the boundary wall that separated my offices from the slum. And then I fixed a computer so that from the other side of the wall, you could see the computer and a touchpad. On the first day, we saw this 8-year-old boy teaching a 6-year-old girl how to surf. How on earth did he figure that out? How did he know what the computer was doing? 3 months after I had first put their computer in the wall, the children said they wanted a faster processor and a better mouse. I asked them, how on earth do you know these words? Where did you learn this from? And they said, well, you've left a machine here that speaks only in English, so we had no option but to learn the language. Easy, isn't it? I repeated the hole-in-the-wall experiment for 5 years across the length and breadth of India. In a village 300 miles away from Delhi, one girl is explaining to the other girl what a neuron is. They're just 12 years old.
Wow.
we have hope. We have an enormous potential of what children can achieve together if we let them.
There is potential everywhere. We just have to unlock it. A huge amount depends on where public money is spent. More of it must urgently go into health, into giving everyone a safety net. There is a revolution that is happening in education, connecting every school, every person to the internet. This can be done. The recovery from COVID must lead to an economy that works for everyone. Let's start with tax. We have widespread tax concessions, tax avoidance, and tax evasion, which means that there's so much less money for all the crucial things. Many developing countries are weighed down by historical debts, spending more money on debt repayments than they are spending on healthcare. And then there's the importance of global investment in peace. The peace dividend for the world is immeasurable, and we must break the vicious cycle of corruption and increase the power of the people to keep check on the people in power. A free, independent media and responsible social media platforms that encourage healthy debate. Equality unleashes the potential of everyone to improve their own lives and contribute to the lives of everyone else.
Whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas. Or we can walk through it lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it.
The lockdown has only shown us that our environment itself can change. In Punjab, for the first time in generations, the Himalayas are visible once again. Lions have reclaimed the roads of Kruger National Park, and in Venice, the canals run clear once more. And across Italy, dolphins have returned.
If you look at the response of people to COVID-19, people dramatically changed their lives. But people have shown an enormous capacity to adapt to new circumstances and enormous capacity to change the way they live, the way they work, the way they organize themselves. So change is possible. The problem is political will.
This is a legacy that needs to change here and now, by changing our behaviors, but also by changing those common practices across the world. We must all make that happen now. Everyone can do their part to make it happen. We can create and enjoy green jobs, live healthier, live with cleaner air and better diets, and in more equal societies, all of us, men and women, can enjoy safer and more productive lives.
There is power in every decision we make. We can shape society and the future of our planet and people in every choice we make. Let's be humble. Let's understand that only in unity and solidarity we will be able to address them. It's true in each one of our countries. It's true at the global level.
Let's take profit to think together as one. How better we can organize an international community to address all the other aspects that can cause poverty, including climate change, inequality, pandemics like COVID-19, and so many others that can only be solved if we join together and if we can have one common strategy, one common project, and one common determination in favor of peace, development, and human rights in the whole world.